Thank you for joining us today for a workshop on the Newcomer Insight Collaborative, a model for collaborative service data analysis. We are very happy that you're joining us today. My name is Irmi Hutfless. I am the Senior Manager of Language Skills and Social Development at Catholic Crosscultural Services. And to my current role, I was the manager of the Toronto East Local Immigration Partnership for several years. And the project that we're talking about today really grew out of a need that was identified by our LIP members for having more localized and more timely data available on newcomer service needs and trends. So I am joined here today by my colleague Sharon Newman, who is the Director of Services and Community Engagement at Access Employment, one of our partner organizations, and by Andre Sierra, who is the Assistant Professor in Operations Management at the Department of Management at the University of Toronto Scarborough and the Rodman School of Business at the University of Toronto. So I will ask my colleagues to briefly introduce themselves. Sharon, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Irmi, for that introduction. So as Irmi mentioned, I'm with Access Employment, and I'm the Director of Services and Community Engagement, East Toronto, which is Scarborough and North York locations. In terms of my background, I've been in the employment sector now for over 20 years under various programs. So very exciting to be working with this project, and thank you for having me today, Irmi.
All right, thank you, Sharon. And Andre, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. As Irmi said, I'm a faculty at the University of Toronto in Operations and Data Analytics, and it has been a privilege to work in this project with their data analysis alongside the agencies.
All right, thank you. Before we start, I'd like to cover just a few housekeeping items. This is a virtual workshop. Unfortunately, we are not able to see you, and I think you're also not able to see each other on the workshop. But we are hoping that it will be interesting and engaging for you all. We have a couple of polls that are going to come up at different points during the workshop. So please, once they come up, respond to them. And please ask us questions. So on your screen, there is a Q&A button. You should see it at the bottom of your screen. So when you click on that, this is where you can ask us questions. What we're going to do is we'll go through all of our presentations, and we'll be answering questions at the end. However, you can ask us questions at any point during the workshop. So don't hesitate. If the question comes into your mind, just type it in, and we'll get to that. Also, you can vote on questions. You can upload questions that others have asked that you are interested in. Also the slides, they will be shared. I believe they're already on the conference platform as well. So you will have access to the slides after the workshop as well. Okay, I would like to start the workshop with a land acknowledgement. And as we find ourselves in a virtual environment, I would like to acknowledge the land that I am on today, and that my organization is on, that I speak to you from today, and that's Toronto. And we acknowledge that the lands that we live on here in Toronto have been inhabited by the Indigenous peoples from time immemorial and are sacred to them. CCS is on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. And we're grateful to have the opportunity to be here and to work in this community. And we also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And for me personally, I'm an immigrant to Canada. So as an immigrant to this land, I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to be here and to and to work here, and for the opportunities this land offers me to learn and to grow as a person. It's a privilege, and I also recognize my responsibility to learn about Indigenous issues, and I'm committed to creating a space for, in my personal and in my professional life, for learning, for dialogue, and to furthering my understanding and my ability to contribute to a more just society on this land. So now I'd like to talk a bit about how the workshop today will unfold. I will start with my presentation, basically introducing the Newcomer Insight Collaborative. So I'll talk a bit about how the project came about, the background, and then I'll link it to its relevance now in the age of COVID-19, and how data really can help us as we all struggle to make decisions. And then Sharon will talk about working collaboratively across organizations to pool nonprofit service delivery data from the perspective of an organization that's participating in a data collaboration. And Andre will talk about, we'll share some current insights from our project, and we'll talk a bit more about data challenges that arise in such an initiative, and what is in store for COVID-related data as we move forward. And then we'll have some time for Q&A, and we hope that you'll have lots of questions for us. We'll have a poll for you, so I would like you to respond to the poll. Do you think, thinking about your work, do you think that data is useful to you in service delivery, as you, in the context that that you work in? Do you think that data is useful to you? So I'll give you just a moment to respond. Most of you, I'd say 95%, if we do a quick math on the percentage, said yes, data is useful to you in service delivery. And one person is not so sure. So not so sure whether data is really helpful. No one thinks that it's not helpful. So I think we recognize that data is really impacts a lot, has a lot of influence on the work that we do and how we plan and adjust our activities. So thank you for responding. Now I will go into my presentation. So I'll talk about the Newcomer Insight Collaborative, how the project started and unfolded, and where we are at now. So what is the Newcomer Insight Collaborative? The project was initiated in 2018, so in the summer of 2018, as the Scarborough Newcomer Needs and Trends project with funding from IRCC through the Service Delivery Improvement Stream. And the goal of the project was really to help organizations, to provide a platform that helps organizations in Scarborough to work together to pool and jointly analyze their service delivery data. The project is led by the Toronto East Quarter Local Immigration Partnership in partnership really with the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. And I'm not sure how many of you, as I cannot see participants, I'm assuming that many of, excuse me, I'm assuming that many of you might be familiar with local immigration partnerships. For those of you who are not, the Toronto East Quarter Local Immigration Partnership is one of more than 75 local immigration partnerships that exist all across Canada. And what LIPs are, they are community-based partnership projects that bring together different organizations and stakeholders in a process of planning, strategic planning and action around the needs of newcomers, with the goal of involving different organizations in addressing needs, gaps, and challenges, and improving the settlement experience for newcomers in their local communities. So it's a very local based approach. And the Toronto East Quadrant LIP is one of 4 local language partnerships in the city of Toronto, focusing on the area of Scarborough, which is Toronto's easternmost suburb. And Scarborough has about 630,000 inhabitants, and about 57% of those are immigrants. So it has a very, very high population of newcomers and immigrants. And UTSC is our local university in Scarborough that really plays a major role as a post-secondary institution and also as an anchor institution in Scarborough. So talking a little bit about the objectives of the Newcomer Insight Collaborative. So the goal of the project really was to, or is, excuse me, to build a platform that enables diverse organizations to pool the service delivery data that they collect for joint analysis, and to motivate and engage organizations in working together on data. Working together meaning basically pooling service delivery data for joint analysis to produce data reports that can help the participating organizations know about what are local settlement needs and trends based on the service delivery data that can help inform service planning and service delivery. And another important part of the project is capacity building. So capacity building for organizations to support agencies in making better use of their data for program planning and evaluation. So why this project? Where did this project come from? Why are we implementing it? The reason really that prompted us to develop this project in our work with our partners and with the community in Scarborough. One of the topics that came up, once a lot was access to timely and geographically relevant data. So that was an ongoing challenge. Data is available, but often the official data sets that we may get from the census, by the time they get to us, they're already a couple of years old. Or other data might not be available in our local geography, might be available for the city of Toronto, but doesn't really tell us what's going on in Scarborough, because that can be very different, or for the province of Ontario. So there was really that need for timely and for localized data. And all organizations collect data. That's part of the service delivery and requirement in terms of reporting to funders. So all organizations have data available that's immediate, that reflects the work that they are doing on a daily basis. At the same time, many organizations don't have the time, the capacity or the resources to really do a lot with the data that they collect in terms of analyzing it, looking at the trends that the data tells us about, and utilizing that. So when we did our strategic planning process with the LIP in 2017, this need really came up strongly and led to a recommendation in our strategic plan to explore the possibility to develop and implement such a shared data system that allows organizations to work together to better utilize their service delivery data to identify local and timely newcomer settlement trends and patterns in Scarborough. So this is how the project was born. Now here in this slide, you can see who is involved in the project. As you can see, it's a partnership project, so there are many different stakeholders involved. Here, there's the TEQ LIP team. So the project is really led by the Toronto East Quadrant LIP with CCS, so Catholic Crosscultural Services, as the contract holder, so the basically the legal entity that holds the contract, and in partnership with the University of Toronto Scarborough. So the TEQ LIP hosts the research partnership lead who coordinates the project activities, works with organizations, does the outreach, and UTSC is really the entity that provides the expertise in data analytics, everything related to data, and also IT. So the UTSC develops and hosts the digital platform for the data upload and analysis, and provides the expertise for data analytics. The project is guided by an advisory committee, and that advisory committee consists of representatives of the TEQ LIP, of UTSC, and of participating organizations. So organizations that work in Scarborough that are interested in the project or that are participating as well. Then there are the participating agencies, and with participating agencies, we are talking about those organizations that contribute data into the platform. So they actively participate in the project by contributing data for the analysis and to produce the data reports. And then there are other service providers. Those are organizations that take part in the project, that are interested in the project, that may participate in capacity building activities and workshops, that may explore the possibility of getting involved, but that are not currently contributing data into the project due to various reasons. Yeah, so these are the different stakeholders and groups that are part of the project. So I'll talk a bit about how to get involved in the Newcomer Insight Collaborative. So as an organization, if an organization is interested in getting involved, the process would start with an expression of interest, which is a very informal process. It'll be just letting us know, okay, I'm interested in participating in this project. What happens next is a discovery meeting with our research partnership lead, and that's really sitting down with the organization to talk about what it means to participate in the project, what is required on part of the organization, how does the data process look like, what is the role of the different players in the project, and how do we deal with privacy and confidentiality, and making sure that the data is protected throughout the process. And this discovery meeting, it can be one, it can be several, depending on the organizational needs and the processes that they have on their side. Once an organization decides that they would like to participate, we sign a data transfer agreement. And the data transfer agreement really sets out what the conditions are and what the agreement is. So ownership of the data, the security, privacy, confidentiality, the role of the different parties in the project. And it's a key document really for everyone who participates in the project. Once the data transfer agreement has been signed, the research partnership lead will sit down with the organization to review their data management system. So one key piece of our project was that we recognize when we talk about data and data analytics and working with data, organizations are very, very busy. And often, some organizations have more capacity. Some organizations have departments or have staff people that are able to deal with data or have that role. But many organizations in the nonprofit sector do not. So they're focused very much on service delivery. So what our goal was with the project, recognizing this big diversity among organizations in terms of size, in terms of capacity, in terms of type of the data management system that organizations use to collect their service delivery data, our principle was that we wanted to create a platform that would make it easier for organizations to participate, not require them to create new reports or to change the way really that they collect their data. So we wanted to work with what organizations currently collect already and pulling that together. So the next step then is the review of the data management system. So how does the particular organization collect their data? What kind of data points do they collect? And then the data points that we've identified to collect, looking at how does that come out of the system? What kind of reports would be run on their data management system? And then this template would be built into our NIC platform. So the Newcomer Insight Collaborative digital platform that is the place for the data upload and to hold the data. So yeah, and then once the data template is built into the platform, we're ready to go. So here you can see this is our interface for the Newcomer Insight Collaborative digital platform. This is the place where participating organizations upload their data. So each participating organization has an account there where they upload their data. They can review the data before it is uploaded. And the platform will notify them if there are any errors in the data so they can be collected. And then it is uploaded and it is encrypted in the platform. So it acts as a secure data repository. So I'll talk a bit about the next step in the process. So when we do our data collection, how do we get from the participating agency service delivery data to the actual needs and trends reports that are produced? So we do data collections at certain points in the process. So all organizations would upload their data for a specified time period. And the data is uploaded into the platform. It's encrypted so that private information isn't visible in the platform. It will be cleaned and tagged to prepare it for the analysis. And then once the data is ready, once it's pooled, it is cleaned and it is tagged, it will be downloaded into a secure laptop that is hosted at the university. And all the data analysis will take place there on that secure laptop. So the decrypted data is only accessible to the researchers who are doing the data analysis at the university. So that's really important for us in terms of ensuring privacy, ensuring confidentiality, and making sure that the data is really protected throughout the whole process. So the analysis will be done by data scientists from the University of Toronto in conjunction with our research partnership lead. And Andre will talk a bit more in his presentation about the data itself, some of the challenges and observations as we pull data together from many different organizations, and and what that looks like. So then the data will be analyzed and a report will be created that looks at the identified needs, trends, and what the data tells us across that pool, across the pooled data from all organizations. So once the data gets into the platform, we're not able to identify which organization it comes from. It's all pulled together and analyzed together, and then the data report will be created and shared with all the organizations that participate in contributing the data to the project. Okay, so that is really the big part of the project. The data pooling, the joint data pooling and analysis. Another part that's really key in the project is capacity building. And that's something that was identified at the very beginning of the project by the organizations that we talked to. At the start, we did a scoping survey to figure out what are the data needs that organizations have, what is it that they're looking for, and capacity building really came out as a big item. And capacity building really to support organizations in their capacity to use and make use of the data that they collect. So capacity building in the project takes place in two ways. One is through capacity building workshops. So we do workshops, and the topics for these workshops are based on the needs that were identified in the survey and needs that we see coming up across the different organizations that we work with. And we aim for the workshops to be very, very practical. So done workshops using mock data so people can really try and test through different case scenarios. We've done workshops on how to ask questions of your data, how to use Excel to answer some of the questions using your own data. Data reliability and challenges in data reliability, and things like motivating staff to collect the data and to comply with data entry requirements, because we know also that sometimes is can be a challenge between we see there's a need for data, but there's also time required to collect the data and a certain degree of attention to do that well. So the capacity building workshops are one part. The other part is one-on-one sessions and individual feedback. And we found that that was also a really key part of the project. But through the meetings that the research partnership lead has with different organizations, different things come up, and those observations also going through the process of downloading the data and uploading it into the platform, some of the error messages that might come out. It helped organizations also to see what works well with their data management processes, and where there might be some areas where they could make little tweaks that can improve things. It could improve the reliability, or that could improve what they can do with their data. So some of that individualized feedback also happens through the project. Some key milestones to date in the project. So we started in the summer of 2018. We built the digital platform that you saw in one of our previous slides. Currently, there are 16 organizations that are participating in contributing data to the platform. We've had 3 rounds of data collection, so about every 6 months. And currently the data in our system includes about 334,000 clients. And there are over 4,390,000 unique instances of service. So what we focused on with our data collection was looking at country of origin, gender, and different services, and identifying service trends and patterns that can help us know more about how clients are accessing services, which services are useful, what are trends and patterns over time that can help in service planning. We have, with the data, produced 4 data reports, and we've had 8 capacity building workshops to date. And we've just released our data sharing collaboration toolkit, picture of which you can see here. And that's a toolkit really meant for organizations that are interested in perhaps starting a data collaboration, or participating in a data sharing collaboration with other organizations, thinking about these things. So it has information in there about what to consider when you're thinking about collaborating with others around data sharing. What are some of the things to take into account? There was some of the processes to set up and some tools and resources. So that toolkit will go live on the TEQ LIP website in the next couple of weeks. And if you're interested in getting a copy of it, feel free to contact me in the meantime, and I'd be happy to share it. So briefly about the impact of COVID-19. So we all know the COVID pandemic started about a year ago and led to a huge shift in service delivery from in-person to online. As some of us had more experience doing online services, others of us had less experience, but everyone pivoted to online service delivery. And we all had the question around how is COVID impacting service delivery and client access? Really, as we shift our services and try to address the needs of our clients in a virtual environment, how does that change? Are we still seeing the same clients? Are the client profiles changing? Are some services accessed more? Are other services accessed less? What does that look like? So those were questions that were asked, and what we looked at with this project is really, can we compare service delivery prior to COVID-19 and then during COVID-19? So our last data collection that we did in the fall of 2020 looked at data from 2016 to 2019, and then comparing that to the data that we had from the COVID-related delivery, basically starting in March until October, and looking at what are some of the trends that we see as a result of that. Do we see, are things really changing with that? What is being impacted, and what does that look like? So that concludes my presentation in terms of the introduction to the platform and some of the background. We have another poll for you that you should see on your screen. How do you use data? So there's some choices. How do you use data? Pick the top 3 choices that apply the most to you. We'll give you about a minute or so to make your choices, and then I will hand it over to my colleague Sharon Newman from Access Employment. Sharon has been part of this project since the very beginning. So Access Employment was one of the first organizations that joined us and has been through the whole process with us. And she will speak a bit from the perspective of an organization participating in a data collaboration. What are some of the learnings, the recommendations, and the observations?
So here are our results. So how do we use data? The top 3, we have to report to funders, 45% of participants, and this is really high, to understand my client base, 82% responded to this category, to identify new trends and areas of need, 64, also very high. A little lower at 18% responded to understand the impact of COVID-19. And then very high for service planning, 91%. And then no surprise, no one has identified that they don't use data. So everyone's using data somehow in their organization. So thank you. So as Irmi mentioned, we've been involved as a participant organization in the project, and we knew from the very beginning that we would be involved, for a certain length of time. So that was very helpful, and part of our sign off to that, we agreed to be a participant for a certain length of time as well. So initially, we had to decide, why to get involved in this. So we've been involved in presentations, team meetings where there was discussion, question and answer about being involved in the data collaboration. And as an agency, and I think everyone has identified that we use data. As Irmi's mentioned, often if we want to get local data or something about trends or reports in the area, it's outdated by the time we get it. And it is hard to collect. So knowing that we have data that we've collected in collaboration with other organizations providing similar or related service, which is very local, that's been really a driving factor in us wanting to be involved. And we also thought, as a LIP partner agency, that we would get to collaborate more with other organizations, be involved in a different level, and see where this goes. We have, of course, been able to share with others, have discussions about local trends. And here we are today, sharing our findings and more with others to share. So things to consider at the very beginning, some of the questions were, okay, what's going to be involved and how much work will this be? And I think that's always something we want to make. We have to make those decisions based on what kind of staff, what time will it take from them? How smooth will this go? We knew again from the beginning that the length of time we'd be participating. And then we also had to get upper management approval and sign an agreement to be involved. So we had to really look at, weigh everything, and the benefits outweighed any other concerns we had. So we moved forward, and we've been a partner in this. All right, so there was a whole process for pooling the data. I know Irmi's gone into a lot of detail on this, but from a very practical standpoint, first question that came to our minds were, what will we have to do, and how time consuming and difficult and challenging will this be? Well, lucky for us, it wasn't overly confusing. We had a lot of support right from the get-go from the research partnership lead. So questions were asked and answered right away. We have in our agency a manager of data analytics. So he became involved in some of the dialogue. And I believe he attended a meeting at one point just to hear a bit more about data. And then from there, the research lead actually walked us through the steps of, how to collect, came on site, to help us collect. And what's unique about our organization, while we have various programs with different funders and different platforms that we collect data, we do have a centralized Salesforce database that we put all of our client information into. So for us, we didn't have to go to multiple sources to actually extract the data. We were given some direction of what to query, and then our manager of data analytics got that together before it was extracted. And there was some back and forth with questions and clarification. And as Irmi's mentioned, we felt very confident with the security level of the data. We felt confident with the process. For us, we actually had the lead come on site and extract our data once we queried and had that ready to go. And from there, we've been in lots of meetings about the data. We've seen the reports of the data. We've had different conversations on, what's been found. And I'm excited to hear more about the last report that Irmi mentioned with COVID, to see more of that. So that's kind of an overview. But at any time, if we have questions, we just ask and we get those answered. And knowing that there's experts dealing with us, we don't have to be the expert. So challenges and opportunities. As mentioned at the beginning, we had to see, buy-in. So in terms of time, we had to ascertain really what kind of time would be involved. And it turns out for each report, there's usually several hours involved from our manager of data analytics. Doing queries and organizing and sending over the data. So we had to, of course, look at that at the beginning and get an idea what would be involved. Part of it you don't know until you're in and if there's any issues or problems, but it's been relatively smooth from our end. Building trust and again, bringing it forward to senior management within the organization to sign off and agree and see the benefit of being involved. And I think also in terms of being involved in this project, we've been able to build a unique rapport with other partners who are participating. So we're all sharing our information together. Only those who are involved in the project will have access to this. So it's been a really great time to hear from other organizations, find out maybe areas that are outside of our scope, what trends are happening and what, some of their demographics look like. And then data management, again, anything with data, right, has to be cleaned. And I know Irmi's shared more about that process, but there is, possible room for error or, missing something. But again, there's back and forth to clarify or, get a better understanding of something we've sent. And that's always happened. In terms of opportunities, as mentioned, we've really deepened our collaboration with all the partners, as well as the lead organization. And now we have access to information that's current, right? It's not years old. And we've had, there's been various reports, so we can always look forward to fresh new data coming in. And it's not just our data that we've collected as an organization. We can expand our data to what other people are sharing and seeing within their organizations. And yeah, I think just the whole collaboration has been a wonderful opportunity. One thing we've talked about too is the impact of COVID. So there's been different challenges, and as we'll see coming up too, service delivery has been different during COVID, more virtual services versus coming in, and no doubt it's impacted, people's ability to seek service, people's, I think, focus changes during a pandemic, where employment, others are maybe looking at more stabilization services, but all these things we'll get to see through the data, any kind of new challenges. So key recommendations. I think from the very beginning, to have a clear understanding of what we would like to accomplish from being involved and being realistic. So we know what we can and can't, get from this data. And it's not just one organization, it's multiple. So having really clear ideas of what's happening is really important. And then assessing your personal organizational readiness. Again, we have the privilege of having a manager of data analytics who's overseeing a lot of our data in programs. So there's not multiple people necessarily that we have to go to, and there could be different interpretations. It's collected from one source. So we knew from that level that we, could handle this with probably little interruption. And then ensuring that there was a commitment from management. And again, this is before we went in, we had to, sign the agreement and have senior leadership see the benefits of it. And from there, I would say what we have done now is share reports with leadership. So they say, hey, this is what we've done. They can see the results, and then we can talk about it locally. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Sharon. And I would now like to hand it over to Andre here. Andre has really been instrumental from the university side to make this project come about. Yeah, he will talk about the current Newcomer Insight Collaborative, share some of the findings and how we're extracting value from the data.
All right, thank you so much, Irmi. So it's been a great pleasure on my end to work on the project, to involve students and involve also co-op students that they have to do some work term, so they can be involved in this project as well. They're always very engaged. But just to give an idea, is that the main goal of the university here is in the data aspect, and for me as a faculty, is how can we actually use that data to provide useful information for agencies? So agencies usually, they already have a set of questions that they want to answer. So we want to make sure that we give reliable answers to those questions, but also we want to identify other trends that maybe it's hard for them to see, different perspectives, just trying to understand what the data is telling us, create a data narrative that they can use to better organize their services, understand forecasts, if more people are accessing a service A than service B, just try to understand what's going on and give this additional, let's say, layer of reliability to their analysis. Now, one thing that Sharon mentioned that is extremely important is that this is a very iterative process. So we ask a lot of questions to agencies, we bug them, we show them numbers, and does this make sense? And then they're going to tell us back, well, more or less, or maybe you should ask another question. Sharon has been so patient with us so far, for example. So it has been a great, it's a really iterative process, and this is really important to have this communication because I already seen some of the questions. How do we ensure that the data is sound? How do we ensure the quality of the data? And this is part of the process. We look at the data, we identify situations where the data doesn't look so great, then we ask them, and then we find the errors, and then we start to understand how to proceed and where the errors are. Right. So what is the role of the university in this context? How do we organize ourselves in the project? Well, essentially, we have the contributions of two departments. One of them is the computer science. Oops, something's going on. All right. So one of them is the computer science department. So what they do is that they provide the software. They do the software development. They do the database development, where the database will live and how the data is going to be organized and structured. They also provide the data security protocols. So all the data has to be anonymized. For instance, when I see the data, when we do the data analysis, I have no idea from where the data is, the agencies are related to that data. So for me, I don't see Sharon, I see A, B, C, D, E, literally. So then we make sure that this data anonymized, and only agencies that submit their data, they have the key and they know which data they provided. And also a number of data access protocols that we have to put in place to ensure that the data is secure, that is everything is cleared up, everything is discussed and agreed upon the agency, the entire formal process that we have to adhere on the data security aspect. And then there is the management, that's where I come from. And we basically focus more on the data analysis, on the managerial insights. So we look at the data, we do the data cleaning, and then we or let's say the high level data cleaning, right? The first step is from the software side, but the second step is, does this data really make sense? So this is my goal and the goal of management department there, and also provide strategic analysis, managerial support. Let's say when you read the forecasts, how can you structure your services? And this interaction, this dynamic is evolving through time. So as what's happening now is that the agents are becoming more and more data experts. So they are starting to ask more information. They want to see more statistics, and this is a great step because it means that they are getting well versed in the data and they want a more reliable information. That's what they're going to see tomorrow in our presentation, that they ask us to show the stats. Now we are evolving. So this project is also evolving because the agencies are getting more and more expertise there. Now everything is happening. This connection, also the one that the bridges between the computer science and management department, is doing my organization that we also have at the University of Toronto Scarborough, at the Department of Management, actually, which is the bridge that they provide the connection between the departments and also the communications with the agencies. So they are an organization within our university that provides this community-university relation. Also, they help us with the data agreement. They help us with all the legal issues or legal questions that the agencies or us may have as a faculty. Now, for universities, this is an extremely interesting project because first, it gave us these educational and work opportunities for students that are very highly engaged. For example, when we were starting to develop the software, we actually put as a class project, as a class competition. So instead of having two people that are trying to develop the database, that are charging per hour, we had 100 students across several different sections that were working on this project so that they could give us the initial database. And they were highly engaged. They are also newcomers and they were motivated by this project. So then we took that, the best of those projects, and then we developed, we started that, we used that as our starting point. So then everybody wins because the students, they learn, the agents, we have much more capacity to develop this larger projects, and also there are work opportunities for students. And finally, we believe that is our commitment also to help the university, to help to provide social actions. And then we give our time, we dedicate our time for free to help you doing those operations. Right, so the data analysis part is when we are trying to do the analysis, essentially our analysis, our focus at least at this moment of the project or throughout the project since 2018, is to give an analysis that is consistent in all the agencies. Again, I don't see the agency information and they are pulling the data, so the information that we want to give is some type of information that is useful for everybody, okay? So our goal is always to ensure that our insights are useful and consistent across multiple agencies. And that is a challenge. We always have to be very careful when we do that. So let me just give you a very brief example. So let's do some data analytics together here, okay? So let's say that I tell you that the average service access per client is 3 times a month. So you look at your clients, on average, 3 times they're, let's say, accessing your language services, your employment services, and so on. Now, if I just give you that piece of data, as we saw in the news all the time, I'm sure that you see averages all around, this number is very tricky because it might be not correct or might be not reliable, all right? But if I just give you that number, I need to always give you something else. So why is that happening? So let me give an example of what could happen here. So in one case, you could have an agency A that have very few access, let's say once a month, and another agency that has a lot of access. And when you provide this aggregated data only 3 times a month, because you're just taking an average, right? What is the common thing between them? You're gonna think that all of them are accessing more or less the same time, but actually an agency, the service that the agency is accessing for A is way larger than agency, way lower than agency B, right? And you think about the other extreme, maybe both of them are also very consistent, 3 and 3. So then you have the situations where even though you report a number, this number might not be consistent across the 2 different agencies, right? Because one, instead of the 2 agencies accessing 3 times a month, maybe one is accessing a lot, others are accessing a few, and when you take the average, it goes more or less the same. So the insights here are different per agency. So then what we do is that we always have to provide data that controls for that. That's what we say. So we always provide what is the deviations. So this is something that we are incorporating now in the report. If the data, if the pieces of information that we are deducing are too different per agency, then we don't report that, we just inform them. The agencies, they may have very different size. So all of this, we have to do a very careful analytics to make sure that we control and that we report the agencies exactly what's going on, okay? So what are the other challenges that we face? And again, always the most important thing here is to have a very close communication, a very iterative relationship with the agencies for us to identify those challenges and address them. It's something that it's important to keep in mind when you're participating with us. We are a big family and we need to make sure what's going on when we do this analysis. So for example, agencies, they use different definitions, right? So who is a client? For some agencies, a client is a person who accesses the service once. For other agencies, a client is a person who is often going, let's say once a week, going there and attending some classes or accessing some type of service. So they have different definitions of clients, and that's going to show different in the database. And we need to make sure that this is a standard, right? Services have a very different, services have very different frequencies. So some services are accessed very often or only once a year. Let's say they are looking for employment, they access it once. Other times, language, they access 3 times a week because they are taking a course, right? There are data samples that are different per agency. And then sometimes we have to deal with redundancy. We don't know whether a client is accessing 2 different agencies. So we always put those assumptions in place. We have to make a lot of assumptions about the data sets. We have to use statistical analysis to make sure it's consistent. But again, our goal is also to provide that information to agencies to indicate, look, these are the issues. this is how we can improve the data collection, and these are the limitations and what we can actually infer from analysis with some reliability. Okay, but again, communications has always been key, and this is just an example of the challenges that come up, and that by having this constant communication with agencies, we can try to address. Now, let me just give you a quick example of a data insight that we can get. So, for example, this was one of the reports a long time ago. One of the early reports is we were doing a gender analysis. So this is essentially the gender access patterns per country. So for different countries, how many times users of the two genders that we analyzed here are accessing the service. So gender equality is extremely important, of course. And by doing this type of analysis, by understanding how often each gender is accessing the services, we have an idea of some trends and what's going on, right? So here we can see that there is a gender equality issue, right? Some people are not taking language classes, then some genders are not taking language classes as often as other gender, and that can become a problem, especially in the context of newcomers, right? For instance, language is extremely important. If you're not taking your English courses, it can be detrimental to your development here in Canada. So we are giving you the receipts. We are providing evidence from the data of a problem that we identified throughout all agencies, and that's something that it could be acted on to ensure that we have a better gender equality, right? And it's evidence-based management. We have evidence to support that. For instance, we can also look at usage distribution. Let's say the settlement, how often each user access the services. It's going to be categorized. For some language training, it's going to have different access. And using this data, we can give some ideas of what they can do. For example, if some services they access only 2 times, maybe they can organize, structure their services to ensure that returning customer or returning clients, the data is going to be there, or whatever insights they need for their particular context. But you can also see some idea of trends. If clients are accessing several times, more than 20 times, as we observed in some cases, then maybe you have to structure a service to get ready for those clients that are coming very often. So there's another example of a type of a frequency analysis, very simple, that we can do for different agency types and that we present in our reports. Now we also have a postal analysis, where the customers are coming from, if they're living close or far from the agencies. So a lot of different analysis that we can perform, again, as driven by the managerial questions that the agencies ask, okay? So for COVID, there's also a question that agencies are coming asking us how we can do the COVID analysis. And we are starting this process now. Essentially what we are doing is we are understanding what the data was before and after COVID. So we want to do analysis before and after. So we want to analyze the trends per year before COVID and the trends per year after COVID. And spoiler alert, as you can imagine, this curve is going to be very different. And then, but again, just collecting the data on that is challenging because many times it's hard for the agencies to keep track which services were online and offline. And then our goal is also to communicate to agencies, look, this is the new situation. Maybe it's good for you to start collecting this particular data set that can be helpful for you to structure your services in the future. So we can also provide those type of data devices to help them better prepare for the future in these different scenarios that are coming in, okay? And hopefully we can do the analysis on that data, on the before and after, and then provide insights that can better inform their services. Well, so this is what I wanted to say. Again, it's a great pleasure, and we're going to answer the questions, but I really want to emphasize that it's critical, this iterative process of communicating with agencies, doing the analysis, and going back with more questions and hopefully more answers. Okay, thank you.
So I've been watching the chat box, and I could just quickly pull up some of the questions. Irmi, is that okay if we? Yes,
thank you. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Now, some of them may have been answered. I think, Andre, you did address some of these, but one of the questions is participation limited to your geographical area?
Yeah, that is a very good question. Certainly, we've talked about that a bit. So right now, the project is focused on Scarborough specifically, and our intent, because it has a very geographic focus, part of why the project was set up is that there's this lack of data that is localized, that is for our that's reflective of what's happening in our local communities. So this project currently is focused on collecting data for services that are delivered in Scarborough. Clients don't, it doesn't mean that we're only looking at clients that live in Scarborough, but we're looking at services that are delivered in Scarborough. So there are a couple of organizations that deliver services in different geographic regions, could be in Scarborough, could be in Peel region and in York region, but we collect the data only for the services that are delivered in Scarborough. The project can potentially work in any community, but in terms of the focus that we are looking at currently, we are looking at Scarborough.
Another question, and I do believe Andres touched on this, but maybe just to make sure we haven't missed anything. How do you ensure the quality of the data and ensure that the data collection mechanisms are sound?
That's a great question. Again, it's an iterative process. So there are different steps that are taking place. And for instance, even the guide that Irma raised and said and is going to distribute now is one of those steps is training. So we train agencies to collect the data. What are the steps? What are the things that they have to look at? That's the first step. Then there is the data collection. So there are some simple things that the software does when the data arrives. If all the fields are filled, if there is some missing data, that's the second step. That's the easiest, is checking if the data was uploaded correctly and what is missing. Now, there are more complicated things that can happen, and they do happen. For example, missing data or data that is incorrect. Maybe there was some inconsistency when the data was uploaded, or linking to wrong customers. So when that happens, usually what we have in place is we have our system where we do some basic initial analysis, and then during the meetings when we present a plot, let's say, we ask agencies, does that make sense? Does it connect to what you saw? And then we get answers, and based on that, we continue our analysis to see qualitatively if we find an issue. And usually we have some patterns. So there are some data techniques that we use to see if the patterns are consistent. We do find, when we find errors, and that happens again, we connect to the agent and say, look, the service in January, February was increased number of access, and then suddenly dropped terribly, dramatically. And then what we do, we connect to the agencies. Were there any issues with the data here? What happens? So again, it's a very good question because it is a difficult problem. Ensure the data has a quality. So we do that in different stages. Since the inception, since the agency is uploading, we have some checks, we train the data, and then we do some qualitative analysis. And whatever, if we identify different patterns that are not common, we try to communicate with the agencies to tell them that there is something going on here. So those are all but it is a difficult question in all data analytics, right? I think the most important here is to ensure that when the data is being uploaded, it is of the best possible, it has the consistent that the agencies expect it to be. So yeah, those are the different steps typically we do.
And I think I'll just add a little bit to that, because this is the key. I think the quality of the data that is in the system is really the quality of the results that comes out in the analysis. And part of it is part of what we do also. The platform itself is set up so that it can recognize certain data errors. So when data is uploaded into the system, the platform can recognize if the data in certain fields is correct or not, or is missing. Also, when we engage with organizations, we look at the data systems and what kind of data is collected. And there are different data points that organizations collect, and the various different capacities that organizations have. And in the process, we have also at some, there have been instances when organization wasn't able to participate in the data, in contributing data to the system, because they did not collect the data, the full data, or it was not completely reliable, or it was or did not collect the data points that we're looking at in our analysis. this was also a really significant part in our capacity building, because it's very easy for data challenges to come up. Some organizations have data systems where when you enter the data, it's already preset to tell you, to only allow you to enter the data in a certain format or a certain way. Other data systems allow to type in, and that doesn't necessarily recognize if there are errors in the data. So accommodating for all those different kinds of things. So some of our workshops really looked at specifically how to recognize data errors in the data management, and how to address those to lead to more reliability on our part as organizations in the way that we collect our data, because sometimes it's looking at making little tweaks and adjustments that can really increase the reliability of the data that we have in our systems.
Great. All right. Another question. What do you see as the risks involved, and how do you try to mitigate these? So it's a pretty broad question, but maybe overall risks.
It's a very broad question. I wish we could have a bit of a dialogue in this. I'll start with some of the risks from our perspective, and then maybe Andre and Sharon can add from your perspective. I think one of the risks that we really looked at a lot at the beginning is around privacy and confidentiality. When we deal with data, we really want to make sure that it is handled in a way that confidentiality is maintained. And when we talk about confidentiality, it's confidentiality of the clients whose data we are working with, and confidentiality on part for the participating organizations. Because in a project, when we are pooling data together, it's really important that when we pull the data, when we generate the reports, that this is not the report on particular organizations, but it's really the data that is collected across the organization. So when you look at the data trends and reports, you're not able to identify particular organizations in that. So privacy and confidentiality was really, really big considerations, and that's where our system was set up to make sure, so to have various different steps and security features in place to ensure the confidentiality of the data that's being contributed, and of the organizations that are participating in the project. What are some of the other risks? I think the reliability of the data and in terms of the results that are coming out. Andre touched on that a little bit already. What are other risks in the project? I think key is the collaboration and the trust that organizations have that are working together in the project. It's really, really important to create that level of trust, and to make sure that everybody can contribute. Everybody who is participating is very aware of what it means, what the parameters are, and is also able to influence those parameters. So to have a say in how the structure is set up, how we deal with the data, and the different pieces. So making sure in such a collaboration, where we're talking about data, which is, data is highly sensitive, and collaborating on data is highly sensitive. So to make sure that that there is trust, that there is an open environment among the participants to be able to talk about the different features of the project, to have a say in them, and to be very, very clear what it means to be involved and what happens when you're involved. So what happens with the data when it's in the system, what happens with the data after the project is done, what happens, how is the data shared. So all these pieces, we spend quite a bit of time to talk about them and to set protocols in place to work with that. Andre, Sharon, is there something that you wanted to add related to risks?
Sharon, go ahead.
I think you summed it up really nicely, Irmi, for us. Thank you.
Just to give a very concrete examples of security, for example, the laptop that we use for the data analysis is not connected on the internet, so we cannot access the data remotely. Everything is encrypted, so even if someone takes the laptop and run away with it, they won't be able to first access the data. Even if they open data, they won't see client names or agency names at all. Again, everything is going to be anonymized. So then we have these different layers of security in place. Just to give an example of types of security that we put.
Okay. Is that good, Irmi? Okay. All right, a couple more questions. So this is assuming that the project has a time-limited funding. If or when the IRCC funding ends, is there a plan for ongoing funding? Could partners support it? Are the benefits that partners get from the project valued enough by them that they would be willing to ensure they find the dollars individually to cover it on a cost recovery basis?
Very good question. I think coming from Dan, that's a very very good question. So the project has time-limited funding, and part of our sustainability plan, of course, is looking at how we can support this project in the future. Because one of the things that is clear is that the project cannot be run off the side of people's desks. So in order to have this project function, there needs to be a staff team that supports it and that works with it, and that supports the collaborative aspects, that supports the data aspects and the technology aspects of the platform. So we're working on a sustainability plan. I think in terms of whether the, so we've had a number of, or we are having, of course, a number of conversations with different stakeholders, different partners with the university around our future plans with it and looking into the future. I think what we also need to recognize that this kind of project, it takes a bit of time. We have developed a digital platform for this, and this takes a bit of time to get developed, to go through the different processes. That is I think something that we need to take into consideration, that these things take time. But yeah, I mean, sustainability, ongoing sustainability is something that we're working quite a lot on.
Cheryl, I think you're muted.
Sorry, hopefully we can get this last question in. How do you process the value leveraged from data to implementation and then sharing to providers and communities, such as trends, service needs?
I think this is a question for you, Cheryl. How do you process the value?
Yeah, so I mean, part of it, the reports is seeing the data locally and in such a timely fashion. So some things very practically that we've done, we've got to see demographics outside of our organization, which helps us with planning, helps us with outreach, and, looking at potentially further projects that we could look at or further partnerships with other organizations. So there's a lot you can do, but again, it's very practical. It's very, timely. And if we had more questions, we could always go back to the partnership and ask for clarification if needed. So it's benefited us in a lot of ways. I don't know, Irmi, if you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, and I think those are the key pieces that you mentioned, Sharon. Something that we also hear from partners and came out through the evaluation is that, and I think you mentioned it before in your presentation, also Sharon, around the collaboration that is really outside of the data itself. It's helping take collaboration to another level, because working together on something as often very sensitive for us as organizations is data, and giving, let's call it giving data away, sharing data with others, that can be very sensitive for organizations. So this project is a step in helping to set up a process for how that can be done, in a way that that feels good to organization, that helps, and at the same time is not threatening, right? Because I think when we talk about data and sharing our own data with others, sometimes there can be a lot of sensitivities involved in that. And I think the capacity building is something that we've heard quite a bit, that and we've seen with organizations. So as part of going through the process, having conversations with different organizations, those that participated, but also others that were not at this point able to contribute data into the system, but have really looked at making adjustments to their data collection practices and procedures that were helpful to them, and made a difference in how they were able to work with their data. So that's been another aspect that has been really helpful. Okay, we got through all the questions? Okay, great. Wonderful. So I think if we did not miss any questions, I know there was one in there asking for my email for the data collaboration toolkit. So I put my email there in the chat. You can find it there if you want the toolkit, or if you have other questions, follow-up things, feel free to send us an email. It's on the screen there as well. So go ahead, feel free to send us comments or questions about it. We're always happy to talk about this more. And I think this also takes us to the end of our time that we have allocated with you. Thank you so much. So, so to everyone who came out to the workshop, thank you for participating, and we look forward to having more interactions with you over the future. Thank you.